So the message this morning is entitled Kingdom Come and Kingdom Go. It's not to be confused with easy come, easy go. It is something that I wanted to talk to you about because I think it's important that we understand what God has intended for us and our future. It's kind of following up with the lesson last Sunday on judgment. This is now talking about the kingdom. And it's taken from the book of Luke, chapter 7, verses 18 through 23. Luke chapter 7, verses 18 through 23. The disciples of John the Baptist told John about everything that Jesus was doing. So John called two of his disciples, and he sent them to the Lord to ask him, "Are you the Messiah that we've been expecting, or should we be looking for someone else?" John's two disciples found Jesus and said to him, "John the Baptist has sent us to ask you, are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else?" Now, at that very time, Jesus cured many people of their diseases and their illnesses and evil spirits, and he restored sight to many who were blind. Then he told John's disciples, "Go back to John and tell him what you've seen and what you've heard. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. And tell him, God blesses those who do not turn away because of me." Now, during this period of time, no one in society was more shunned in their culture than blind people, people who were lame, people who had leprosy, and people who could not hear, who were deaf. They had absolutely no place to live. They had really no name. And from a societal standpoint, they had no value. They were kind of like a canker sore on their culture, or like excess baggage maybe thrown by the side of the road. But rather than calling those people trash, Jesus called them treasures. Now, in my hall closet at home hangs a sweater that I never wear, ever. It's too small, the sleeves are too short, the shoulders are too tight, and the thread is just a little frazzled. And I should probably just give that sweater away because I have no personal use for it. Logic would tell me that I need to clear out the space, and so just get rid of that sweater. And that's what love say, but love won't let me do that. There's just something unique about that sweater that makes me want to keep it. What's so unusual about this sweater? Well, for one thing, it has no label on it. Nowhere on that garment will you find a tag that reads, "Made in Taiwan" or "Wash in cold water." It has no tag because it was not made in a factory. It has no label because it wasn't produced on some mass assembly line like so many of our clothes are prepared these days. It isn't the product of some nameless big company employee who's working there simply to make a living. And though the sweater has really lost its use, to me, it has not lost its value. It's valuable not because of its function as a sweater, but because of its owner. That sweater is my dad's Letterman's sweater from high school. And it reminds me of what the psalmist had in mind when he wrote in Psalm 139, verse 13, "You," referring to God, "knit me together in my mother's womb." I want you just to ponder and think about those words for just a minute. You were knitted together. You are not an accident. You were not mass produced. You were deliberately planned. You were specifically gifted with the talents that you have and lovingly positioned on this earth by your Creator, the master craftsman. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, it says, "For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." In a society that has very little room for second fiddles, that's really good news. In a culture where the door of opportunity might open only once and then just slams shut, that's a revelation. In a system that ranks the value of human beings by his salary or her legs, let me tell you something. Jesus' plan is a reason for joy. Jesus told John that a new kingdom was coming, a kingdom where people have value, not because of what they do, but because of whose they are. The year 1899 marked the deaths of two very well-known individuals during that age. Dwight L. Moody, who was an acclaimed evangelist, and Robert Ingersoll of Ingersoll Rand fame, a very famous lawyer, very gifted orator, and a very well-connected political leader. And these two men had lots of similarities. Both were raised in Christian homes. Both were skilled orators. Both traveled extensively, and they were widely respected in their particular communities. Both drew immense crowds when they spoke, and each attracted very loyal followings. But there was one striking difference between these two men, and it was their view of God. Ingersoll was an agnostic. He was a follower of, at the time, what they called naturalism. He had no belief in the eternal, but stressed the importance of living only in the here and the now. Ingersoll made light of the Bible, stating that free thought will give us truth. Does that ring a bell in today's culture? To him, the Bible was, and I'm quoting, a fable, an obscenity, a humbug, a sham, and a lie. He was a bold spokesman against the Christian faith. He claimed that a Christian creed, quote, was the ignorant past bullying the enlightened present. Again, sound familiar? Ingersoll's contemporary, Dwight Moody, he had very different convictions. He dedicated his life to presenting a resurrected king to a people that he knew were dying around him. He embraced the Bible as the hope for all of humanity and the cross as the turning point in mankind's history. He left behind a legacy of written and spoken words. He established institutions of education. He put into place churches and changed lives. These two men, both powerful speakers, both influential leaders, one rejected God and the other embraced him. And perhaps the impact of their decisions is seen most clearly in the way they died. I want you to listen to how one biographer paralleled the two deaths. First of all, speaking about Ingersoll. Ingersoll died suddenly. The news of his death stunned his family. His body was kept at home for several days because his wife was reluctant to part with it. It was eventually removed for the sake of the family's health. That's how Ingersoll's death was reported. Ingersoll's remains were cremated, and the public response to his passing was, "Oh, okay, who's Ingersoll?" For a man who had put all of his hopes, all of his dreams, all of his thoughts, all of his waking time in this world, death was tragic and came without any consolation of any hope whatsoever. Moody's legacy was a lot different. 2nd of 1899, Moody woke up to his last winter dawn. He had weakened substantially overnight. His health was declining very quickly. And he began to speak in these very slow and measured words. Some of them were, "Earth recedes, heaven opens before me." His son, whose name was William, thought his dad was hallucinating, and so rushed over to talk with his dad. And he said, "Father, you're dreaming." And Moody said, "No, this is not a dream. It's beautiful. It's like a trance. If this is death, it is sweet. God is calling me and I must go. Don't call me back." And at that point, the family gathered around, and moments later, the great evangelist died. It was his coronation day, a day he had looked forward to for many, many, many years. He was now with his Lord. And here's the headline from that day. The funeral service of Dwight L. Moody reflected that same confidence. There was no despair. Loved ones gathered to sing praise to God at a triumphant homegoing service. Many remembered the words the evangelist had spoken earlier that year in New York City when Moody said, "Someday you'll read in the papers that Moody is dead. Don't you believe a word of it? Because at that moment I shall be more alive than I am now. I was born in the flesh in 1837. I was born in the spirit in 1855. That which is born of the flesh may die. That which is born of the spirit shall live forever." And now turning back to our story, Jesus looked into the eyes of John's followers and gave them this message: "Go back and tell him the dead are raised to life." Jesus was not oblivious to John's imprisonment. He wasn't blind to John's captivity, but he was dealing with a greater dungeon than Herod's dungeon in which John was now being held. But Jesus wasn't through. He passed along one other message to clear any cloud of doubt that might have been in John's heart and mind. The good news, John, is being preached to the poor. Many years ago, long before September 11th, I was late to catch a plane out of Portland, Oregon. I wasn't terribly late, but I was late enough to get bumped. And they'd apparently given my seat to a passenger who was waiting on standby. When the ticket agent told me that I would have to miss the flight, I went a little lawyer on her and thought I would give her my most compelling closing argument. But the flight hasn't left yet, right? I said. Yes, but you got here too late, she responded. I got here before the plane left, so is that too late? The regulations say you must arrive 10 minutes before the flight is scheduled to depart. And that, sir, was 2 minutes ago. But ma'am, I pleaded with her, I've got to get back to San Diego. And she was very patient with me, but she was firm. I'm sorry, sir, but the rules say passengers must be at the gate 10 minutes before the scheduled departure time. At that point, I knew I had met my match. And I said, I know what the rules say, and I'm not asking for justice, I'm just asking for a little mercy. She did not give me any mercy, and I had to take the next flight home. So much for my going lawyer on her. But God does give us mercy. Even though by the book I'm guilty, by God's love I get another chance. Even though by the law I've been indicted, by his mercy I'm given a fresh start. Paul, in writing to the church in Ephesus in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, not by works, so that no one can boast." Church, no other religion in the world offers this kind of message. All other religions demand the right performance, the right sacrifice, the right chant, or maybe the right experience. Theirs is a kingdom of essentially trade-offs and bartering. You do this, and God will do that. And religions that take on that kind of vision end up creating people that have two completely polar opposite results. Either arrogance or fear. Arrogance, if you think you've now achieved it, and fear, if you fear you have not. Christ's kingdom is just the opposite. It's a kingdom for the poor. It's a kingdom where membership is granted. It's not purchased. You are adopted into this kingdom. And this occurs not when you do enough, but when you admit that you can't do enough. You don't earn it. You simply accept it. And the result? Oh, you serve, but not out of arrogance or fear. You serve out of gratitude. I read a story about a woman who for years and years had been married to a very harsh husband, and I will just tell you that's putting it mildly. Each day, he would give her a list of things to do. And this list had to be completed before he got home from work. The list included cleaning the yard, stacking the firewood, washing the windows. I mean, it went on and on and on. And if she didn't complete the tasks before her husband got back from work, she would be met with his explosive temper. And even when she did complete everything that was on the list, he was just never, ever satisfied. he would always find some inadequacy about the work that she had done. Always.
Have you been talking to my wife again?
I have. I have, Steve. And this is the troubling part. The husband died. And the wife remarried. But this time, she married a man who lavished her with attention, with love, with kindness, with generosity. And one day, this woman was going through a box of her old papers, and the wife discovered one of the famous lists, the dreaded list that her former husband had created. And as she read that list of things to do, it caused tears to come to her eyes and splash onto this list. And she said, you know, I'm still doing all of these things on the list, but no one has to tell me. I do them because I love him. And that, church, is the unique characteristic about God's kingdom. Its subjects don't work in order to go to heaven. They work because they are going to heaven. Arrogance and fear are replaced with gratitude and joy. But before we can pray, Lord, thy kingdom come, we have to be willing to pray, my kingdom go. And that's important, because if we have not chosen the kingdom of God first, it will make absolutely no difference what we've chosen instead. Kingdom come, kingdom go. I said, not easy come and easy go. We'll get this technology ironed out hopefully sooner rather than later. We've just been experimenting, and some of the previous technology we had was dying, and so I'll try and get it ironed out. Maybe that's my cue to just shut up and we move on. So I hope that with today's message, you understand that God has created a kingdom where he's inviting you to come. We talked about judgment last Sunday, but now we're talking about being part of God's kingdom this Sunday. A kingdom where you don't work to get in, a kingdom where you work because you're going there. And I hope you can take that message with you and find some encouragement from it this week. Maybe share it with someone else who's hurting, that would like to know that there's a future for them beyond just working, on the conflicts that go on in cultures, beyond the wars that are happening in Afghanistan, beyond all the stuff that we are just bombarded with every day. This is truly good news. Keep it for yourself, but don't keep it to yourself. Share that good news with others and let them benefit from a promise that God has made to them as well.